Friends, if you could take a seat, we will begin. Welcome to this afternoon's event on fostering innovation in large Latin American companies. My name is Cindy Arnson. I'm the director of the Wilson Center's Latin American program, and I am thrilled to be partnering in today's event, not only with the World Bank, but with also the Vedanta Foundation, which has partnered with us over the last year in sponsoring a fellowship on innovation in Latin America. And it's probably the case that this topic is not nearly as interesting as the parade for the caps that just sounded the horns and had a great spectacle down Constitution Avenue, but we appreciate your joining us. I'd also like to thank Santiago Gutierrez, who I don't see in the auditorium right now, who was our first, is he here?
They're over there.
There you are. Our first Vedanta Wilson Center Fellow on this topic of fostering innovation in Latin America. On Friday, we have the deadline for the second year, which is on the topic of fostering sustainable tourism. Those of us who have studied Latin America and lived there and are themselves Latin American know the extraordinary creativity and resourcefulness of the citizens of the region. And somehow that passion and creativity is not always reflected in the statistics on innovation or on economic growth. All of the major reports, and here we have Marisol Argueta from the World Economic Forum, the reports by the WEF, by the World Bank and others, the Global Competitiveness Report, the Global Innovation Index, the Networked Readiness Index, indicate that Latin America is among the worst performing regions of the world. And that seems to also be true of many Latin American firms. The global rankings for innovation companies have at most 4 names of companies from the region, and 2 of them were founded by the United States and are based in Caribbean countries. And the problem, as we all know, is that innovation is the driver of productivity, and in turn, productivity is the single most important determinant of long-term economic growth. So Latin America's performance on concerning productivity is also less than spectacular. From 2000 to 2016, total factor productivity in the region actually decreased by an average about a 0.5 percentage point per year. This was unfortunately the second worst result in the world after the Middle East and Northern Africa. So somewhere in this path from innovation to productivity to economic growth, things break down. And part of what we're trying to do today is to understand how to reverse that and improve the situation. So our focus is on large Latin American firms and their strategies for innovation. The top 1,000 companies in the region contribute something like 30% of the region's GDP. These companies do not necessarily produce the most jobs, but they certainly produce a significant number of jobs in the formal sector. Companies have financial resources, lower costs of capital, knowledge of markets, global connections, et cetera. So I feel very privileged that we have with us today senior representatives of leading Latin American companies, along with experts from the World Bank and the IDB and former government officials to discuss these issues, innovation, productivity, and the future of economic growth for Latin America. I'd like to mention that we have programs here. If you didn't pick one up, you can get one on your way out. There are extensive bios of each of the panelists, so we'll not be repeating that. For those of you who might be tuning in on the web, these will all, either they are now or will be on our website, so you can consult them there. So people, Marisol Argueta, the head of Latin America for World Economic Forum, former foreign minister of El Salvador, will introduce people briefly, and then people will speak. Thank you. Excuse me, wait, Humberto, I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself. Humberto Lopez from the World Bank, thank you.
Thank you. And I will try to be brief, because I think that we have a distinguished panel here that are going to be having a conversation that goes to the substance of innovation and productivity in Latin America. Let me first thank the Wilson Center for the invitation, and also Cindy and the Latin American program for organizing an event like this. I think that is critical that we talk about these things of innovation and productivity in Latin America. Following the decline in GDP in Latin America in 2015 and 2016, the recovery that we are seeing in 2017 and what we are expecting in 2018 is not really dynamic. And indeed, if you compare where we were over the golden decade that managed to reduce poverty dramatically in Latin America, and today there is a big difference that the prices of commodities are not where they were. With lower prices for commodities, Latin America has to rely on something else than the prices, and this has to be on innovation and productivity. This is one of the reasons why at the World Bank we're putting these topics at the center of what we are doing these days. Beyond growth, I think that if you talk about poverty, is also you can bring the issue of productivity and innovation to the table. When we are talking about poverty reduction, we are talking about two things: creating many jobs and ensuring that they pay good salaries. And in many cases, the jobs are going to come from growth. But in many other cases, we have been talking about encouraging growth by reducing salaries. This is not good to reduce poverty. What we need is that salaries pay well, and for that we need innovation underlying these salaries, and this is critical. We can think also about how we do that, and in many cases we are going to be talking about the skills. I see Guillermo Perry here, one of my mentors in the bank, and he used to say that if in Latin America what we need is education. You don't have education and we are going to fail in many cases. But we need to ensure that there is education for everybody, that everybody has the skills and everybody has the ability to exploit what innovation and productivity is putting on the front. Because otherwise we are going to have the haves and the have-nots. And for a region that is, after Sub-Saharan Africa, the most unequal in the world, probably this is something that we don't want. And finally, let me just reflect about one additional issue, and then I move to the panel, which is the issue of innovation and disruptive technologies. I've been talking about innovation for growth, for poverty reduction, to manage inequality. But many people are now putting on the table what is going to happen if innovation starts bringing artificial intelligence to the table, machines, and we don't have enough jobs for people to work. This is a debate that we have been putting since the 1800s, when the Ludites starts complaining about the possibility that the job market was going to disappear as we understand it. Still, many people today have that concern, and this is something that we have to look. In one of our last publications in the World Bank, The Jobs of Tomorrow, Technology, Productivity, and Prosperity in Latin America and the Caribbean, we have been looking at what innovation and digitalization are, the impact of these elements in the job market. And the good news is that it's positive in terms of employment creation, and not on a net basis. It's not that we create some jobs and we destroy many others, and on average we are good. Is that in general we find that there are employment is created for everybody, for the skill and for the unskilled, probably for the skill more than for the unskilled, but in general what we are saying is a Pareto improvement for everybody. So once again, an additional reason to be looking at all these things. I would like you not only to reflect only on the growth part, which is probably what it keeps many of you with the concern, but also to look at the poverty issues, at the inequality, and at the job market of tomorrow. I think many people are going to be looking at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, Eric and Anders and all the great team at the Wilson Center for having us again this year. We just concluded a very successful advisory board meeting for the Latin America program, and it's always a pleasure to be back. We have a stellar cast to speak about a very crucial topic in Latin America. This is fostering innovation in Latin America, the power of large companies. As we all know, the fourth industrial revolution is expected to exceed all previous transformations in scale, scope, and in complexity. Is Latin America ready for this? What is the role of business in addressing all these challenges and opportunities that are posed not only by technological innovation, but also by change induced in the ways that production is now made and way consumption is also made. So we have with us today Woods Staten. Woods is the CEO and the chairman of a board of Arcos Dorados, and is also the chairman of a board of McDonald House Charities in Latin America. Arcos Dorados is the largest franchise for McDonald's in the whole world. And Woods is also the chairman of our advisory board for the Latin America program at the Wilson Center. We also have with us Claudio Muruzabal. Claudio is the president for SAP Latin America and the Caribbean. SAP is a leading German multinational software corporation. It specializes in managing business operations and also consumer relations. And Francisco Morandi, a Venezuelan by birth, is the VP for Corporate Strategy and Investments of the AES Corporation. This is a Fortune 200 company and one of the world leading power companies with presence in more than 16 countries. And we also have Ivan Chavez. Ivan is the Executive Vice President of the Vidanta Group, and he's responsible for various partnerships with global entertainment companies. Vidanta is a Mexican conglomerate involved in the design, the finance, and the operation of hotels, resorts, and associated infrastructure in various cities in Mexico. As we all know, innovation is a driver of economic productivity and of social progress. Innovation is impacting every region. However, Latin America seems to be very lagged. Many blame this to labor-intensive sectors and the high dependence on natural resources versus other regions that are very knowledge-intensive, prospering with value-added production and consumption geared to those areas. So I would like to ask if this is a fact, if anyone can argue against that. Woods, in your experience as a leading business multi-Latina, what has your experience been in creating innovation, in breaking through with your products and your processes?
Well, thank you for the question. We have, as you said, the largest franchise for McDonald's in the world by far. We have almost 2,500 restaurants all through Mexico, all the way down to Brazil. And we've innovated in a number of ways. One thing that we've done is that we, first of all, when you were talking earlier about productivity productivity and performance in Latin America being one of the lowest, I'm happy to say that our part of the world, our company, is one of the best performing McDonald's systems in all the world, as far as margins, volume, customer satisfaction, as well as productivity. And that's all based on innovation. We have to be innovative because of competition. Our biggest competitor is a thing on the statistical sheets called others. And others are all around us. And as my son says, if you're not paranoid, that doesn't mean somebody's not after your business, right? But anyway, one thing we've done to innovate is we created kiosks that sell ice cream. And we are the leader in that, and now the McDonald's system has picked up that innovation and taken it to other parts of the world. And we did it because we had to be competitive. And we are by far the largest seller of ice cream in all of Latin America, more than Nestle, more than General Foods, more than and their successors. So we're very happy about that. We've also innovated with a thing that we call cultura, cool cultura, de servicio. And what it is if you go to McDonald's, you go to Burger King or anybody else, a lot of times you get robotic responses. People, the crew kids, employees are sort of there to get you in and get you out as fast as possible. What we've done is promote having people be themselves. They can come in with their earrings, they can come in with makeup, they can come in with colored hair, which they do. For an old person like me, it's shocking sometimes, but for the customer, it's great. And also, that thing that we've innovated in Latin America to attain and retain the best employees has also been picked up by other parts of the world. And then, finally, to address something that was talked about, the poverty in Latin America, the lack of jobs, and all the challenges we have as a region, we innovated by getting together with McKinsey and Company, and we came up with a program of youth employability. We hire 90,000 young people every year, more or less, 80,000. And they come in, they stay for a while, then they go off to university. So, but our responsibility for them doesn't end when they've left our doors to go to another job. And we feel that we have an obligation to teach them soft skills, like how to do a curriculum vitae, how to prepare for an interview, and that kind of stuff is important for us because we're not obviously the 90% of our time is spent on getting profit. But 10% of that time is also on being good neighbors and being good corporate citizens. And I think this program that we've started has now also been picked up by the rest of the world because, youth employability and preparing youth to get jobs is one of the biggest challenges we have. It goes, I think, beyond robotics and artificial intelligence. It goes more closer to home, keeping them from going into the maras and going into criminal lives. So I think that's where we cross, our corporate social engagement with our profit, and that's innovative. And it's all because we have a lot of innovative people in the company because we're in a creative part of the world. So that's...
Great experience. Thank you for sharing, Woods. Let me jump to Ivan. He's in a different sector in Mexico. This is tourism and entertainment. How has your experience been with regards to innovation and the creation of these breakthroughs in your sector?
So in our company, it's a company that's been around for 44 years. We're about 17,000 people now working, with a common goal of, hosting everybody into Mexico and showing a different side of Mexico that, people may not see regularly. Innovation is at the core of everything we do. And what I mean by innovation is not just, big steps that look like magic tricks. Our competitors think they're magic tricks because they just see something come up, what they think is overnight, and they don't realize that it's the result of many, many years of small-scale innovation year after year. So I'll give you an example, design-wise. We build our resorts, but we know that our customers every year expect something new. And so they want to come back and they want to see a new restaurant, they want to see a new tower, they want to see a new beach club. And so we do that by working with, the best architects, but also we try to do things differently from what they're used to. One example is we've divided our resorts into 3 layers. So subterraneous, under the ground, we put all of our service tunnels. So underground, under this resort, you have, in some of our cases, where we have many, many rooms, you could have 2,000 or 3,000 people moving underground and without disturbing, the resort experience at the ground level, where we keep the guests at with golf carts and other means of transportation. And then we add a 3rd layer, which is on wooden walkways, elevated from nature. So what that does, when we think of those things in design and we separate, service from the ground experience, from what we call the sky experience, suddenly your vacation transforms into something else. And suddenly, when people are there for a week, they're not thinking I'm in a resort. They think I'm in a very, special place, completely disconnected from anything that they've seen before. And then we also realize that people want more than just a beach and a margarita, though that is, a great point that Mexico offers. But they want more. They want to be entertained. They're looking for experiences. So something we did is we went and approached, leading entertainment companies around the world. One of them, for example, Cirque du Soleil. And we said, hey, we want to start a show, with you in Mexico. How come your permanent shows are only in Vegas? We've seen what you did in Vegas. We've seen that through your shows, a lot of people that are not typical gamblers are going and they're spending time with their families and they're extending their vacation stay. We want that for Mexico. So let's talk about, how to do that. So when we approached them, we did a feasibility study and it didn't come out as strongly as we wish. And the reason for that is because since people are there enjoying their pool time, their vacation time, afterwards, right around that time where in other cities, like in Vegas, they get ready to go to dinner and go to a show, in Mexico, families are typically, winding down from a day of being in the sun, and they're looking for something more relaxed. So what the study showed it was that if we had just a show without a dinner component, it was going to be hard for people to come because they were going to prioritize their dinner, and then moving afterwards, to a venue to see a show that they could see at home was not a big factor. So something that we did is we said, well, what if we do two things? What if we integrate Mexican design, and what if we make it a culinary experience? And what if instead of 2,500 seats, we do a smaller venue that is a lot more intimate, 600 seats, a lot more comfortable, and then we include dinner or tapas. And so something that seems, when you see it now and you experience that show, it seems like something that anybody should have come up with. It seems like a great idea, but to get to that idea, requires, literally years of going around and determining what needs to be done. And now, out of all the Cirque shows around the world, the highest satisfaction is the one that we have it's called Joya in Riviera Maya. And the reason that satisfaction is so high is because the experience is a lot longer than what it typically is for a Cirque show, in Vegas. In Vegas, it's an hour and a half show. Maybe there's intermission, maybe not. But here, people arrive to the venue beforehand. They have drinks, they have dinner. They go into the theater, and then, there's also dinner packages in there, and then they stay afterwards, and, they do that. So in terms of offering a product, we're in our industry in Mexico, we have to be very competitive because tourism, as you know, anybody can choose where to go. So people can decide, do I go to Hawaii or do I go to Puerto Vallarta? And so we need to compete not just on price, but quality. And so that's what we try to do. And again, in terms of innovation, we do it with our people, for example. We train and cross-train, all of our hosts, our employees, to have what we call a more complete job. And I'll give you an example of what that is. Typically a housekeeper just does housekeeping. Maintenance just does maintenance. But our people want to make more money. So how do you pay them more money, just like that? So we've come up with a system that we've just launched where we do a cross-training of added value. So, for example, we can train the housekeeper to be a housekeeper, but also to perform some basic maintenance duties. So that allows us to pay them more because it could save us time and materials and other things that you would have to rely on maintenance to do. Same with the waiters. Typically in Mexico, we're lucky we have great staff and very hospitable people. Typically, you have the waiter that takes your order, and then you have the busser that comes in and cleans the table. Two separate tasks a lot of the time. So here we say, well, what if if the waiter does the job of the host, the waiting, the busing, service? So that's, again, a more complete job. And like that, we roll a lot of programs that, they're innovative in a way because I cannot believe that more, companies aren't doing them. We have our transportation system for all of our employees. In one of our resorts, we employ 4,000 people just in operations in Puerto Vallarta. That means we need to have 25 different buses and routes, to pick them up and bring them home. And so we see those things as things that over time, they've been a necessity of operation, but also a way to retain, the best talent. Even something like making a division on the bus and leaving the first 10 rows with a little water bottle, a little thank you note saying, hey, thank you for being, some of our best. And the people that never miss work, they're classified as elite, they wear an elite badge, and so they get to sit on those seats. In the employee cafeteria, they have their own section with waiters and, in service. They get to enjoy that as well. And so there's things that we can do, with our training programs to take them, one notch higher. Another example I'll give you is, people always ask us, Mexicans, you guys are very hospitable, very service-oriented, but how do you train somebody to give you this stellar 5-star service? And the question is very valid because we have devised a system where we can grab somebody that maybe lives 2 hours away from our resort. They do not have air conditioning in their house. They're sharing a tiny house with 8 people, their family and siblings. And yet we grab this person, put him through a training program, and teach them, how to give a 5-star service. What does it mean to have a clean table? What does it mean to polish somebody's sunglasses by the pool? How do you set up a table where, you have 7 different, courses, and where at home they may not even, be never had a meal like that. So what we did is we created models. So we've rebuilt portions of our resort in our training facility. So we have exact replicas of the rooms that people will be working on, exact replicas of the security booth, exact replicas of the housekeeping carts. And so it's really a practical school, where people come and they go through this, 2-week intense program, for training. And then when they pass, or what I call, self-selection, because the training is so intense that if you make it, typically you stay with us for decades. If you don't make it, then this is not for you. And so again, those are the kinds of things that, when I spoke earlier about innovation not being something that happens overnight, it is the accumulation of little things that we have to do year after year. And what we've come to realize is that our tourists are craving that momentum. When they come, they want to see something new, and they better see something better every year. And for us, the biggest threat, as we were speaking about earlier, is to become outdated. So we don't want our facilities to be outdated. We don't want our processes to be outdated. We really challenge ourselves every year, to come up with something new and to deliver it, properly. So, there's many, many examples I could give you.
Thank you, Van. One of the takes from both Woods and your intervention is that investment in human capital is very key. And this also addresses one of Humberto's concerns. How does innovation also impact society? And I think a great example, it can be shared by Francisco, as we were speaking earlier. What is innovation and sustainability? How is AES Corporation also addressing those issues related to sustainable growth? Can you share with us some of your examples, Francisco?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for having me here. I think, as a global power company, innovation is a key component of what we do every day. We feel it's part of our DNA since we were founded in 1981. We're a provider of energy solutions, generation and distribution. And the whole change in the energy matrix around the world, and the fact that technology is making renewable sources cheaper and cost-effective, it's a key component of our long-term view of bringing innovation to an energy matrix that was traditionally served by fossil fuels, and being able to do it in a way that the customer does not see the reliability affected. And this is, to us in the power sector, is the holy grail. We have been working in energy storage for many years, and specifically in the case of AES, we have been doing that for more than 10 years to find out a way to complement renewable sources when the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow. And we started earlier. We tested batteries, technologies. We were very much focusing on understanding how the technology works to kind of pick a leading technology that we believe could be the technology of the future, because it will provide enough reliability if we'll be able to start fast as other fossil fuels plants are able to. But then we move a little away from the concept of the technology, and we try to understand, what needs to have energy storage as a concept to be able to provide full backup to the energy network in the different places where we are. And that innovation was done inside the corporation. And I think I look back in 10 years, and the key thing for this has been that small group of 1-2 individuals that started thinking about that was always protected, was never taken away from budget when the bad times came to Latin America and we have to review OPEX and CAPEX, and has been constantly investing because there is a vision that this opportunity was really helpful. And 10 years later, we have a product. Last year, we launched a joint venture with Siemens. Why? Because we are in 15 countries. Siemens is in 160 countries. It's a great opportunity to bring a technology using the sales force of Siemens and the understanding of the market. But this is a product that you can put together with a solar photovoltaic solution and will provide 4, 5, 6 hours of energy backup, helping you provide reliable energy. And this sustainability of the system is key. And this has done in 2 ways. One is, I think, picking on what Ivan was saying, small little steps of innovation. our current CEO has been very keen in focusing on those small steps of performance improvement. He, as also Ivan was saying, so probably you read my notes here from your side. He likes to say that innovation is not invention. And I mean, I'm an engineer by training, we tend to only wait for the breakthrough. And what we found out is that we own utilities in El Salvador, and we own utilities in Indianapolis. And some of them were doing great jobs at resolving some specific issues that they believe in El Salvador and in Indianapolis that were not connected. I will say that a typical one that we had is theft. Nobody steals electricity in Indianapolis, right? And when we talk about this in Indianapolis or in Columbus, Ohio, they look to us and they don't understand what we call administrative losses. So when I say that people don't pay the electricity, they steal the electricity. And there are ways to make it more difficult to for that to happen. But at the same time, when we put them together, they were able to find common points. And some of the things that were developed in El Salvador are now used in Indianapolis or in Colombo or in Electropower in Sao Paulo. Why? Because there was created a forum, we call it APEX, AES Performance Excellence, where every year we put a competition, people bring their work, they do white papers, there's a jury, the senior executive leadership goes to that meeting, they are the active judges, and they award certificates to the best, and there's a ceremony of recognition. And then there's what we call the Innovation Congress, because we found out that some of these small ideas, together with other small ideas, were larger ideas. And we believe those could be launched as a big innovation. So it's a compound of different small steps. And the example of energy storage is one that we did, something that came as an idea to find a way to work together and help some renewables. And it was developed internally, and it was presented at one meeting where the lead of that project came with his idea, and someone from the business in Chile said, I can use that solution. Why don't we launch a pilot and we see how it works? And that was the beginning of the story. We also saw, from a safety standpoint, that we were very much concerned to a series of hazardous activities we do in the electricity business. Some of them are related to inspections in very dangerous areas, so transmission lines, confined areas. And we started thinking about drones. So the CEO of the company at some point 3 years ago provoked the team and said, can you do some of these things with drone? And the initial reaction, well, you don't understand, technology is not mature, FAA will do this and that. There was a small team that was created. We went through the whole company doing something that in the past Richard Pascal called the power of positive deviance. Who was doing something within the corporation that was done better than anybody? And we found a company that was protecting the reservoirs with drones in Brazil. We took them, we tried to understand, and we started and launched a group that ended up in a joint venture with a company that we have, it's called Measure, with now those drone activities for inspections in infrastructure for not only electricity, but other type of technologies. You are able to take some of this workforce and they become pilots. You have to have a certificate to do that. This is a very careful activity. But the fact of the matter is that we reduced 25,000 hours of hazardous work now done by drones. So you're improving safety through innovation. So I think my message is, don't look at the small step that Iwan was saying as not as innovation. I think that's the first opportunity where you see that you're able to improve your processes, but also be consistent in supporting. And definitely, as the draft of the document that was put together said, there is a great driver in these initiatives, and typically are the CEOs of the companies that understand and believe that with innovation you will make the company more productive and you will make the sharing more efficient. So I think at the end, even though we're not a multi-Latina, we're in 9 countries in Latin America, I think at the end we're able to say that some of this knowledge has been shared, some of this development has been done by electricians in some small towns, in some very small places, and they're able to share it and be able to be recognized and eventually go up in the corporate ladder of the organization because there's a system and a process to do that. So we cannot forget that it's very relevant to have system and processes that capture the increase and the evolution of innovation in the corporations.
That's certainly very key. Thank you, Francisco, for sharing. We have learned from food and beverage, from the great experiences that Woods have shared, from Ivan in the tourism and entertainment, and from you on the energy sides. Claudio, software company that works across sectors, what have you found in Latin America? What are those opportunities and challenges that you would like to highlight?
As you well said, Maricel, I'm not a practitioner of innovation, but I had the privilege of being associated with innovation and technology development through all my professional life. And I want to go back to Cindy's initial comment of Latin America being probably challenged in terms of R&D investment, and as a result of that, productivity. And I had the opportunity to see it firsthand. Prior to joining SAP, I ran the IT captive business for one of the largest multilatinas. So I saw innovation applied out of a Mexican company for many years. And it was very clear that in the end, it all came to applying innovation in a different way to maximize the value of it. And I recently read an article in the Academy of Management Journal, which I thought was very relevant, because it said that, and it studied R&D around the world, and particularly looked at family-owned companies in the developing world, and found that although the investment was lower comparable to the rest of the world, the output of that investment was higher. Mm-hmm. And it has to do with creativity, being able to do more with less, and find a way of doing it. If you also look at a recent BCG study from the beginning of this year, looking at multilatinas, found out that 13 out of the 20 companies that produce the most patents in Latin America are multilatinas. So with that in mind, I think we need to look at innovation in a very different way. I had the opportunity to have 900 executives from Latin America attend an event last week on innovation. And I was thrilled to see that while their counterparts from the rest of the world are probably considering whether to get into producing innovation sprints or hackathons in their companies, a large percentage of the executives in the room for Latin America were already doing this. Mm-hmm. And were finding a path to generate innovation. But all this has to do with technology in the end. And we are at a point in the development of technology that we have a unique opportunity to leapfrog the state of the art and position our Latin American companies in a different way. I'm sure you all been bombarded by the concept of digital transformation and what that means in terms of changing the way businesses are run. Let me tell you, that's all news. For those companies that have not embarked in digital transformation, it's already too late. The real opportunity has to do with emerging technologies. Has to do with the fact that after many years, technologies like big data, artificial intelligence in the form of machine learning, blockchain, IoT, and most recently, the fact that you can interface a computer system through natural language, and we use that at home, by the way, the form of Google Home or Alexa. All that is creating a new opportunity. The opportunity is not to just look at how to make a process digital, but to change the way you run your business, creating a true intelligent enterprise that merges processes that have been digitized with, at the same time, taking advantage of big data to create insight. So why am I getting to this point? Because I believe that for the first time, we're seeing that governments and academia in Latin America are starting to play a role in supporting that change in direction. When we thought of government in the past and how government would help innovation, we would definitely think of development banks and the fact that there will be access to funds at probably a lower rate that it will be available elsewhere. Now we see many more governments, starting with Brazil, recently Brazil, taking a role in helping business come up with creative ways of expanding their reach in terms of innovation. The same is happening in academia. It's not just supporting the startup and creating an incubator, but creating truly technology campuses in support of businesses that are the way to bring a bridge between students and the opportunities that they have once they exit university. So with all that in mind, I need to go back to Umberto's comment at the beginning of labor. And coming from the technology side, definitely what's on the table is the discussion whether technology will be the end of labor or not. I believe work is going to change in the future, but not necessarily it will have the impact that many predict in terms of loss of labor. There's a very recent OECD study that says that only 14% of labor will be impacted by automation, and that many more jobs will be created by the fact that technologies create opportunities that don't exist today. So I want to end that with a comment that I think is relevant, and it's the fact that we as business leaders have a duty to our shareholders, but also have a duty to the communities in which we operate. So purpose is becoming a larger role in defining the future of our businesses. We at SAP have found that our purpose goes around making sure that we produce a small component in terms of education to make sure that we create opportunities for work in this environment that will change. So we work with universities. We have more than 20 university programs in the region. We also partner with the Inter-American Bank and Junior Achievement to produce labor opportunities for challenged communities around the region. And we also believe that the journey starts in high school. So we created a program that's called Latin Code, which is a competition to develop special programming skills in high school kids, which doesn't stop in the hard skills of programming. It looks at soft skills also, and how they will be able to have the technical skills, but at the same time, be able to work in the environment of the business. So if we connect innovation to technology, technology to education, and then to the contribution that we can do in the community, I think we have made some progress in the region.
Thank you very much. It seems that talent is there. It's leveraging that talent, what we are in the need to do, so that we improve that performance, that we improve that productivity, and have the impact that we want to have on society. We were discussing with Ivan a few minutes before we began the panel on what external challenges he has to face in an industry as tourism entertainment. First thing that comes to mind is public safety, public insecurity in the region. A second factor of disruption or a huge challenge that in an area like Puerto Vallarta or Riviera Maya you have to face is the natural disasters, hurricanes, and the impact that has. And I was fascinated by the fact that innovation is not only on technology, not only applied to talent, but even on emergency situations, what they have recreated. Maybe you would like to share, Ivan, the innovation that you have created at very challenging moments in your industry.
So Marisol thinks we're insane because far from seeing hurricanes as something that is always negative, we're crazy enough to even think that there could be tourism, for hurricanes. Something that we do in our resorts is that we really design the hurricane shelters to be really functional and to still be a vacation experience in the event that a hurricane comes. So, these shelters, now we have, specifics on what they need in order to be very safe. But we also design it like a mini resort in mind. So if people are going to be stuck, for a day or two in there, we have a section that is the spa section, where they can still get their massage. We have 2 or 3, food options. We still build a little kids club. We still have live music. We still have, all of the options that really, people want to get in their vacation. And the response to that has been tremendously, positive. This is something that happened out of an accident, if you will, with Hurricane Wilma in Cancun that destroyed most of it. We did that. We asked our people to volunteer, and whoever wants to stay, it's a completely volunteer. Everybody else can go home. And a lot of people stayed because they wanted to be with the tourists that could not, leave on time. And what we found is, if you see that as an opportunity, you're going to get guests for life. And we've never gotten so many letters afterwards that, the people that were there, that were volunteering, that were still providing the service without knowing what was happening outside, was tremendous. And it's like a crazy bonding experience. Of course, we take other measurements. We put anti-hurricane curtains, and we hope it, it doesn't really happen as often as we would like. But something that we always keep in the back of our minds is that, when you're already the biggest boat on the river, you have to grow that river, to keep going and to go faster. And what I mean by that is, we often make decisions based on growing the human capital of others. So it's easy to sit here and say, we do X, Y, and Z for our own people, and everybody's always looking in. But in our countries, development for everybody is a priority, not just for our own companies, but for everybody. So we really encourage everybody to make decisions that increase the greater good of not just their company, but of the community. And I'll give you examples. Our chefs, we tell our chefs, try to buy local. And every chef says they want to do that. The reality is that they want an easy life. They just want to fill a form and, give me everything, and the distributor brings it. But our guys actually go and find, like a cheese, producer somewhere in Mexico that's just starting, and we try it out and we buy it. Or, there's Mayan communities that produce amazing honey, for example, and they don't know how to market it. They're just, 3-4 generations of honey makers, and it's great honey. They don't know how to sell it. So our guys go in there and help them create a label, and then, we get them started and we buy it. So with that mentality, even as we walk through the breakfast buffets at the hotel, when we look at the cheese, we're not just looking at the cheese, we're looking at the family that sells the cheese. When we see the honey, we're not thinking just of the honey. We know the family that's making this honey that is now running their own label. So we make those decisions, and I guess you could see that as innovation also in a way, to encourage the people that are surrounding this organization to grow as well and to continue. So,
Thank you for sharing that experience. And it's incredible to see how a creative mind can make of a challenge a success story. And I'm sure you've also faced situations like that, Woods, as you've entered new markets, as you've conquered new markets. As a leading multi-Latina in the F&B sector, what have been those challenging moments for you as you enter new markets? People could think that Latin America is so standardized, but what has made you change your products or make those small changes, as Francisco was mentioning, those small steps in your processes to be able to conquer those new markets in Latin America?
Well, I think you said something important. Not every country is different. Really, every city in many of our countries is different. And what we've done is we have a core menu, but we also have, especially in the case of desserts, in the case of breakfast items, what people consume locally. And to get those to our standards and do them in a big volume and still be good and nice has been a challenge. So I think that's one of the places where we've used innovation, where you get something, a general idea, but then you adapt it to your local market, which is what a lot of us, I guess, do. And then also adapting to labor laws, convincing governments that in fact it is good to have people, they can have flexible hours. It's not just a question of having 8-hour a day jobs. That it's good because that person can then become a student and progress in life and not be stuck in that level. So, yeah, it's just every country is different, and of course the biggest challenge we have is the volatility of the economies that we live in. It's very difficult to plan long term in Latin America. We are probably a leading indicator of what's going on economically, because we sell a product which is relatively low price, and it's an everyday something you consume every day. So we're at the very cusp of everything that's going on. That's complicated.
That is very challenging indeed. And in your case, Francisco, what have been the most difficult challenges that an energy company like AES has faced in Latin America?
Well, I think, as we was saying, the volatility of the region, has been one of the largest challenges. I think in our case, having generation business, hydrology is something that you can not control, and some of the latest years, hydrology has been bad for many countries in our portfolio, so that in some ways has become an issue, and which, by the way, has allowed us to make some countries that believe that hydro is the natural battery that the electricity system have, to defy them with a different view, because when there's no good hydrology, you are suffering, especially in systems that have large dependency in hydro. Brazil, for example, is one that I directly saw as I was in Brazil a few years ago. So I think that external factors to the region are very relevant. And of course, change in rule of law and regulation. We are a highly regulated business in some cases. When we go through the utility business, the consumer and his ability to pay and his disposable income is relevant. So in this changing times, it's very difficult and in the utility sector to deal with customers in economies that are becoming more and more complicated. So a solution that has to do with dealing with low-income population and middle class is very relevant for utilities, but it gets complicated and vary from country to country. So I definitely think that rule of law, regulation, the adoption of new technologies, a little bit of lack of credibility in some of the new technologies, and an issue of looking a lot to the past and knowing or thinking that the solution of the past will help you in the future, and which has not been the case. But I would say that in general, looking to Latin America, I feel very optimistic of some of the recent changes we have seen in some administrations, and that put the majority of the countries looking to growth their business. In the case of the power sector, to be able to introduce more renewables and new technologies that will help them, consider energy as an infrastructure, and energy is an incredibly dynamizing factor for the economy. So not only because it allows you to create an infrastructure in itself, but it helps you from all the spectrum of the population. So it's not rural electrification anymore. It's having a solution that allows you to, for example, help a customer that has decided to have 100% renewable energy, like some of our commercial or industrial customers in the places where we are, and is willing to do that, and you have to come up with a solution. So I think I'm optimistic. I'm Venezuelan, so I have to be optimistic. But I think in general, I see the countries in Latin America moving towards the right direction, of course, with its exceptions. And it is our role to work with regulators and with governments to try to find the best solutions that are applicable to each country, because, as Wood was saying, not only every country, every city is different.
True. It's true. And you mentioned the necessity of or the challenges in regulations. There's some lawyers in the audience, and the fast pace of technology. Many believe that the pace of as which regulations are made and laws are created, not only in Latin America, but in the rest of the world, can just not adapt. It becomes obsolete almost as we speak. So a different kind of regulation making process needs maybe to be established globally, where maybe more dynamic protocols are able to be adapted with a faster pace as technology is also changing. But besides those challenges, we've seen the importance of investment in human talent. We've seen the impact on labor. We have seen sustainability. We've seen the investment in R&D. Many claim that there are not enough private and public resources for financing so that innovation can be really promoted in Latin America. What is your take on that, Claudio? And what would be an ideal environment if we were to create an ideal framework for Latin American firms to thrive in innovation terms? And maybe not only on the large firms, which is the focus of our panel, but what would be that the values, the elements that would be necessary in a region so that not only the large firms, but also the smaller firms are able to thrive without needing to come to Silicon Valley so that they can be innovators and have the impact that their potential can provide.
Yeah, I'm not a financial expert, but I truly believe that access to financing resources is not the issue at this point, at least at this point in time. But you're right that the successful startup that starts in Latin America, and we have big number of those and big number of unicorns that have started in Latin America, take a route that is predictable. They start in the country, then they become a regional player. All of a sudden, they have to move to Miami to be able to really conduct the business better. And then Miami is not enough, and you have to move to the West Coast. And in fact, if you have this conversation in Miami, where I come from, this is the daily question. So how do we make sure that the startups stay in Miami and don't go to the West Coast? And here we still have the issue of how do we make them stay in the region and don't go to Miami? And a lot of that has to do with regulations. And it has to do with the fact that although there's a lot that has happened in the recent past, there is a need to have more business-friendlier regulations for startups. I'm sure you've seen all the statistics of how long it takes to open a business in a given country in Latin America as compared to anywhere else. So that is definitely an opportunity. What are we doing in our end to try to support? We're not in the business of providing financing for startups, but we are in the business of supporting startups with the development of business cases and getting them access to technology so they can jumpstart their business. And it has been very successful. We have a startup group in every single country that we do business. And we work directly with the government agencies that support startups. We connect with the incubators in universities and incubators in the private sector. And what you're seeing more and more is that there is an open mind in terms of government institutions to address the issue. Now, we need to make sure that we don't take it that far and that it becomes now a more regulated environment. So there is hope at the end of the tunnel, but it's a question of finding the right support in every given country and then make sure that that talent doesn't go, stays in.
Clearly, yes, and intellectual property rights, I think, is something where there has been a lot of arguing for and the need to improve those areas. One of the indicators for innovation is actually patents, patents that have been registered. 2016 numbers in Latin America showed only 1,400 patents registered throughout Latin America and the Caribbean. This is 10%, less than 10% compared to South Korea, that registered 15,560 patents in 2016. Maybe that's another factor that needs to be leveraged, but I see that we have only a few minutes, and before I monopolize further the conversation, I would like to ask the audience to also participate and feel free to ask questions to this very distinguished panel on the topics of your relevance, or if there's any specific area or comment that has not been addressed, please. We still have some time for your questions. Just Please make sure that you address the question to someone in the panel, and please introduce yourself. Thank you.
Yes, hello. Antonio Arce from Duke University. I have a question for Senor Staten. I would like to know a little bit more about the sort of the global value chain context of the McDonald's Corporation and some of the multiplying effects you may have on local and regional economies as you look at the sources of cattle or beef from farmers or transportation or the construction industry. You mentioned an investment in skills for employees. I would love to hear a little bit more about the impact on the local and regional economy of the corporation.
Yeah, well, you know, we have a lot of commodity-driven countries. So, for instance, a lot of the beef in the world is produced by two big beef producers in Brazil. JBS is one of them. The other one is I'll remember in a second. But you know, clearly they sell a lot of beef all over the world. They sell a lot of chicken as well, poultry, and one of the sources of lácteos, I don't know how you say it, dairy products in the world. You know, you have New Zealand and you have the South. You know, you have Argentina and a little bit of Uruguay. So we have a lot of food, and we are providing a lot of that food to the McDonald's system all over the world. So that's one of them. And then the other thing which is interesting, talking about human capital, is now the corporation has set up an idea where they want to start trading people. So we're supposed to give them people from Latin America, and they'll give us people from other parts of the world. And it's enriching the company, and you know, the idea is that person then comes back. Problem that I have with that is that the people we're going to give, I need them back. No, and it's a problem. I mean, you know, I was talking with some Brazilian friends the other day. He lives in Key Biscayne as well, and he's Brazilian, and he said that today there are 3,000 people on that island looking for an EB-5 visa, which is an investment visa. They're young people. They have money. They have ideas. And we're losing that talent to this great country, but we need it there. So that value chain we need to reverse somehow if we're going to grow, and if we're going to get up to standards. Yeah.
Thank you, Woods. Yes, please.
Brazil Foods.
Hmm?
Brazil Foods.
BRF.
Brazil, BRF.
Thank you. Christine Moyes, FTI Consulting. What challenges do you think Latin America still faces in intellectual property, and how do you think they can improve these challenges? To any of the panelists.
Claudio?
Okay, I'm not an expert. That's another thing that I'm not an expert on. We could spend the rest of the afternoon talking about intellectual property issues in the region. And I don't know exactly which is the biggest challenge. I can tell you what is the next biggest thing in our industry, and that's privacy laws. That would definitely have an impact. If you follow the EU regulation on GDPR, this is coming. We've got creative ideas in different countries. That's going to be one of the biggest issues hitting a region in terms of regulation in the near future.
Thank you, Claudio. I had another question over there. If you can please introduce yourself and address your question to one of the panelists.
My name is Constanza Nieto. I am co-founder of a consulting company in Silicon Valley, and we help Latin Americans with innovation. We have seen in Silicon Valley that corporations really invest in startups and are all the time looking for innovation in startups. But I didn't hear from any of you if you are really working with the startups, if you are creating corporate investment funds to invest in startups. I really believe that those funds are going to really activate Latin America, and we need desperately that you guys, corporations, start investing in startups to close the circle. So are you guys doing that? Are you investing in startups?
Francisco?
Specifically in our case, what we have set up a framework that we call AES Next. We understand that the digital transformation already exists, and being a digital utility is something that we see every day. So someone who doesn't have any asset, and doesn't have any plan and hasn't invested $2 billion in facilities, with a computer or a system can start stealing your customers and providing retail services. So we establish a company that we call Next. It's an incubator to try to build up a digital solution business for us. And what we have been is selecting different opportunities that will fit and will be able to create a solution that will be purely digital. And that's something that we started recently. We haven't had any commitment on funding, and we don't consider this as a venture capital fund within the company, but it's a unit that analyzes how to be a fully digital business in the future. Why? Because our current customers are looking to digital solutions, and we understand that they're going to be demanding those services. So there's a little bit of building our own future through our own company. I think whenever this becomes something larger, so size and commitments of funds will probably be the most appropriate in the future, but definitely is a key issue. If you look at some of our affiliates in the world, they try to establish incubators for their own small initiatives. We have partnerships in the case specific of Brazil with local incubators promoted by local banks, Itaú and Bradesco, where they set up a building with incubators, and the energy partner is AES, and whatever development they have in the energy sector, we can test drive it in the company, and that's how we have found some opportunities. So both at the corporate and the local level, we haven't. It's an excellent point. I think we miss that one as a key source for innovation.
Claudio, would you like to add anything to that question?
In addition to what I commented before, we have a startup group in every country that we do business. So Startup Brazil, Startup Mexico. That model is primarily focused on the business case, supporting the entrepreneur with the business case, and with technology. The second stop is that we allow them to sell with us into a client base. So that gives them a market. The third option is that we have some financing vehicles, SAP Ventures, SAP IO, different ventures around the world that invest in startups. So they have the opportunity to also participate, to be supported financially by SAP. So it is a big part of the way we go to market. In Latin America, absolutely, yes.
Great. We have time for another, maybe we bundle the questions. If we can start with you, then we continue with you, and we conclude with you, Cindy.
Yes, hello. My name is Alejandro Lara, and I'm a co-founder of Brain and You, which is a nonprofit startup that we're intending to provide a behavioral approach using the latest neurotechnologies. My question is, I would like to know, hopefully from each of you, if you're actually investing, because guess what? At one point, I got news for you, we're all gonna be retiring soon, most of us. So the question is, are you truly investing in youth brain development, youth development in general, because there are innovators all over the planet, and so that's the question. You're true an aggressive, if there is an aggressive investment in education, by educating youth innovators in certain countries. Thank you.
I think that question was addressed at the beginning of the panel when we were discussing the investment in human talent. Let's hear your question, and then yours, Cindy. We only have very little time left.
I'm Kat Cooley. I work with the Palladium Group. We're an international development contractor and consulting firm. And I was wondering if you see or have experienced the role of the bilateral or multilateral donor community in catalyzing innovation in corporate development, and what kind of value proposition you look for in negotiating those deals if you have. For a little bit of context, we run 2 large competitiveness and corporate innovation workforce development programs in Guatemala and El Salvador with large grant funds, like $10 million a piece, just focused on co-investing with large firms.
No, I'll take a shot at
Want that?
just a part of it.
Yes, please.
We're working with J.P. Morgan, with Citibank, with the IDB, in a lot of the corporate social engagement things that we're doing. And I don't know if that answers your question, but that's where they're involved. And obviously we work with those same banks in our normal corporate life. But in our innovation and capital, human capital, they are partners. And they're not $10 million, but they're in the millions. Yeah.
Thank you, Woods. Well, thank you very much for sharing all these great experiences. I'm not Venezuelan, I'm Salvadorian, but I think I'll join you in being optimistic, Francisco. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.